Pope Francis, the 266th leader of the Roman Catholic Church and a historic figure in the annals of global religion, has passed away, as officially confirmed by the Vatican in the early hours of Monday morning. His death marks the end of an era not just for Catholics, but for millions around the world who saw in him a symbol of moral courage, reform, and compassion in a world often riddled with division and complexity. The statement released by Cardinal Kevin Farrell read with solemnity and reverence. At 7:35 this morning, the Bishop of Rome, Francis, returned to the house of the Father. His entire life was dedicated to the service of the Lord and His Church. These words echoed across cathedrals and newsrooms alike, capturing a moment of immense loss and reflection. Though the official announcement came as a shock to some, there had been growing concern about the Pope's health in recent months. Whispers and speculation had surrounded his condition since February, when it became publicly known that he had been hospitalized with double pneumonia. This condition, already serious for anyone, was especially dangerous for someone of his age, nearly 89, and with a history of respiratory issues. The pneumonia, characterized by fluid-filled air sacs and inflammation in both lungs, was compounded by a concurrent bout of bronchitis, making recovery more complicated. Still, reports from within the hospital had painted a somewhat reassuring picture. The dignitaries, including Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, made personal visits to his bedside, and following one of those meetings, Meloni reported that the Pope was alert and reactive, indicating a lucid mind and an enduring spirit, even in the face of deteriorating physical health. But this was not the first time Pope Francis had faced serious medical concerns in recent years. His health had been an ongoing subject of international attention and concern, especially given his central role in guiding over 1 billion Catholics worldwide. In March of 2023, he was admitted once again to Rome's Gemelli Hospital, where he was treated for a respiratory infection that required several days of hospitalization. At the time, there was some relief when COVID-19 was ruled out as a cause, but the incident nonetheless served as a stark reminder of the pontiff's frailty. The Vatican's official statements at that time confirmed that the Pope had been experiencing difficulty breathing for days prior to his admission, raising fears about a possible cardiac or pulmonary issue. However, heart problems and pneumonia were reportedly ruled out after a series of medical tests. Medical professionals and Vatican insiders have often commented on the resilience of Pope Francis, especially considering the challenges he has faced throughout his life. As a young man in Argentina, he endured a bout of pleurisy, an inflammation of the membranes surrounding the lungs, that was so severe doctors had to remove part of one of his lungs. It was a traumatic and life-altering experience, but one that he weathered with a stoic acceptance, which would become a defining trait throughout his life. Even decades later, that partial loss of lung capacity would make him more susceptible to respiratory complications. Yet he rarely spoke about it publicly, and when he did, it was usually with humility and a quiet strength that inspired those around him. June of the same year brought another health scare, as the pontiff underwent stomach surgery that required a prolonged hospital stay of 9 days. The procedure, intended to alleviate a painful intestinal condition, was yet another reminder that while his mind remained sharp and his faith unshaken, his body was beginning to betray him. And still, he carried on with his duties, presiding over masses, issuing encyclicals, meeting with global leaders, comforting the sick, and guiding the Church through turbulent times. It became clear to many that Pope Francis saw his role not as a position of power, but as a sacred calling, one to be fulfilled fully and faithfully until his final breath. Born Jorge Mario Bergoglio on December 17, 1936, in Buenos Aires, Argentina, Pope Francis' path to the papacy was as unorthodox as it was deeply rooted in service. The son of Italian immigrants, he grew up in a working-class neighborhood and was influenced early on by the values of humility, compassion, and social justice. After a brief flirtation with a career in chemistry and a rumored teenage love interest, Bergoglio felt the call to the priesthood and joined the Jesuit order, a move that would shape his entire worldview. The Jesuits, known for their intellectual rigor, social commitment, and missionary zeal, instilled in him a deep concern for the marginalized and an unshakable belief in the power of dialogue and reconciliation. His journey through the Church's ranks was marked by dedication and a genuine commitment to pastoral care. As Archbishop of Buenos Aires, he became known not for his opulence or political maneuvering, but for his preference for simplicity and direct engagement with the people. He often traveled by bus rather than limousine, cooked his own meals, and made a point to live in a modest apartment rather than the Archbishop's palace. These small but powerful choices earned him respect and admiration from those both inside and outside the Church. When he was elected Pope in March 2013, following the resignation of Pope Benedict XVI, it was a moment that broke centuries of precedent. Pope Francis was not only the first Jesuit pope, but also the first from the Americas, the first from the Southern Hemisphere, and the first non-European pope in more than 1,200 years. His election signaled a new direction for the Catholic Church, a move away from the traditional centers of power in Europe and towards the global South, where the majority of the world's Catholics now live. His papacy was immediately marked by a sense of urgency and a desire for reform. One of his first major acts was to initiate a comprehensive overhaul of the Vatican's bureaucracy, often referred to as the Roman Curia. He introduced a new constitution that aimed to decentralize authority, promote transparency, and emphasize the pastoral mission of the Church. He also worked to hold clergy accountable in the wake of sexual abuse scandals that had rocked the Church's foundation for decades. Though his efforts were met with both praise and criticism, no one could accuse him of complacency. Perhaps one of the most defining aspects of his papacy was his approach to LGBTQ+ issues. While maintaining the Church's traditional stance on sacramental marriage, he openly supported civil protections for same-sex couples and famously asked, "Who am I to judge?" when referring to gay priests trying to live faithfully. It was a moment that reverberated around the world, a simple sentence but one that carried the weight of centuries of doctrine and dogma. His statements did not always please conservatives within the Church, but they resonated deeply with those who had long felt excluded. Throughout his time as Pope, Francis also focused heavily on environmental issues, social inequality, and the plight of refugees and migrants. His encyclical Laudato Si, released in 2015, was a passionate call to action on climate change and environmental stewardship, and it resonated far beyond religious circles. He saw ecological degradation as not just a scientific or economic issue, but a moral one, a failure to protect our common home. In this, he again demonstrated his ability to connect spiritual teachings with pressing global challenges, blending theology with advocacy in a way that few religious leaders have managed to do so effectively. Francis's papacy was also marked by a unique style of communication. He preferred plain language over ecclesiastical jargon and was not afraid to speak off the cuff, even at the risk of stirring controversy. His press conferences on papal flights often made headlines, and his social media presence, particularly on Twitter, allowed him to reach younger audiences in ways previously unimaginable for a pope. Yet for all the headlines and high-profile gestures, it was his quiet acts of kindness that perhaps best defined who he was. He washed the feet of prisoners, kissed the hands of lepers, embraced children with disabilities, and constantly called attention to the poor and forgotten. In an age of celebrity culture and political spectacle, Pope Francis remained a servant leader, one who led by example rather than decree. As news of his passing spreads, tributes are pouring in from around the world. Religious leaders of all faiths have expressed sorrow, praising him as a bridge builder and a man of peace. Heads of state, from democracies and monarchies alike, have recognized his moral authority and global influence. Ordinary people, Catholics and non-Catholics alike, have taken to social media and public spaces to share their grief, their memories, and their hopes that his legacy will endure. He was 88 years old at the time of his death, a long life by any standard and one lived with purpose, humility, and unyielding faith. As the world mourns, the Church must now prepare for the next chapter. But there is no question that Pope Francis has left an indelible mark on history. His papacy may be over, but the spirit he embodied, of compassion over condemnation, of dialogue over division, of mercy over judgment, will continue to inspire generations to come. Rest in peace, Pope Francis.